Welcome to the show, Seth.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
So, where are you from? New Hampshire?
Yeah, I'm from a small city called Franklin, New Hampshire. I currently still live in the Lakes region, District 11 AA. It's a real cool spot if anybody's ever popping through.
Your
My
shirt, your hoodie kind of gave it away.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, I got the billboard.
And the accent a little bit too. I lived in Massachusetts for a little bit, so I can pick up that New England accent whenever I hear it.
Cool.
What's your sober date?
My sobriety date is 8/11/22, so I'm in my third year.
8/11/22. What was going on August 10th of 2022?
So August 10th of 2022. I gotta go backwards to go forwards a little bit. So
Well, we'll go back. We'll go backwards too. I like to hear what the last day was like, and then we'll rewind to the beginning.
cool. Okay. Yeah. So I was in what's in Massachusetts is called a men's holding facility. And so I'd been checked in as of July 25th. And at this time I had been in AA in and out for many years. They didn't have really much programming at this place. We were just there after the dry out spot to be held to go to the next spot. And there was an AA big book and there was some spiritual literature. And I had made the mistake of beginning to read the stuff. And I was that's my sober day because I was seeking meds in there and I was prescribed to some stuff that today I'd say can't be part of my journey for this alcoholic. And I was getting stuff from this kid. I was supposed to have a prescription transferred from Worcester to up there, and this is impossible. So this has to do with later on my concept of God or a higher power, if you wish. But this kid goes, "Hey man, I got I got these things for you." And that morning I had prayed and said, "Hey dude, AA God guy, whoever you are, if you're real, I will do this stuff forever. But just take this obsession from me because I can't do anything with it. I'm gonna end up doing all this again." And I said, "Hey man, I'm all set." And I remember walking away from that going, "This is impossible for me to. It's impossible for me to not take something to adjust the way I feel." And I walked away thinking, how did I just do that? I could never put the drink down. I could never put the drugs down. This kid had free stuff, and I was like, "Nah, man, no, I think I'm all set today." And that begun a journey that would change my life and my perception. I hope,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Were you born and raised in New Hampshire?
No, so I was born in Lompoc, California, on a military Air Force base called Vandenberg. We moved down to Florida until I was about 8 years old. We moved up here when I was about 8 years old. Yeah, and then I went down to Boston, Mass, seeking sobriety. And it took about 6 years of being in and out with some exposure to Alcoholics Anonymous and even some exposure to the steps. So if you are listening to the podcast and you've been in and out or you're just coming back, like it takes a lot for some of us like me to come all the way in and sit all the way down, but it still can work, you know.
What did you discover first, drugs or alcohol? How old were you?
But I was 13 years old, and I believe, because if I had known people would ask me questions, I would have been taking notes and shit. But I I can't remember half of it. But I took a drink. It was alcohol. I took a drink when I was 13, and that put something there that wasn't there before, and something happened, you know.
Yeah.
And
Did you
yeah,
grow up with your parents together?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And I know it goes both ways where either you're a child of divorce or your parents were, not straight edge, but like they weren't addicts or alcoholics and they were still together. Like my parents were together until my dad passed away last year. So, I had a really good upbringing and, always never needed for anything, but yet I found myself at 11 and 12 drinking. So I can relate to being 13. Did your parents stick together?
Yeah, my parents are still together today.
Brothers or sisters?
I got a brother and a sister. Yeah,
Younger, older?
I'm the oldest.
You're the oldest, so am I. the one to make all the mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the stop by to say hi. She goes to a lot of meetings with us, and a few weeks ago, she gets used to the language there, and they go, "Is anybody willing to be a sponsor?" And she raises her hand and goes, "Livy, alcoholic." She's thrilled that if anyone's looking for a real sponsor, there she is right there, man. That'll force humility getting sponsored by a 3-year-old, you know.
All right, so you're 13 and you discover alcohol. What kind of void did you have with your parents being together and all that? What were you seeking?
The way I described it is there was always a separator between me and other people. It was almost like there was this glass wall. I do remember looking at, for me, a lot of it had to do with school, man. Like I would feel weird in school, and I would do weird shit. Like I would watch like the Addams Family and see like that, like the little boy wore like weird white little gloves, and I would rummage through the attic and like find like gloves and like go to school wearing them, pretending to be him, and just weird stuff like that. And I remember being off in the distance and watching kids interact with each other and thinking to myself, they look like they feel differently than I do. And when I had my first drink, I got freedom of self. I didn't care anymore. The glass casing between you and I melted away, the gap closed, and I was able to talk. I was able to try to be funny. I was able to try to, be ridiculous and try to arm wrestle you and stuff like that. And the way I like to say it, alcohol made me want to go downtown. When I took a drink, I was like, let's go downtown, baby. And it was that way from the first drink on.
Yep, no, I totally know what you mean. And for me, I was bullied a lot because I'm a bigger guy, and I've always been a bigger guy. So I discovered alcohol because of The Outsiders, that the movie and the book The Outsiders. And they were drinking in the movie, and they were like teenagers. And my friend would sleep over, and we would sneak into my parents' basement and steal some Captain Morgan and make some Captain and Cokes, and think we were cool. And then by the time I was 12, I started getting bullied more, and by my best friends. And I lost somebody close to me. He was hit by a car, and he was my age. And I remember saying to one of my friends, like, "Hey, if we drink, we're gonna feel better." So that's me at 12 drinking like an alcoholic, because I wasn't drinking daily, but I was drinking for the effect of filling a void, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And the book Alcoholics Anonymous, for those who haven't picked up on it yet, I'm an AA guy. I took the 12 steps, and I'm a not big book thumper. I don't believe everyone has to do AA. I don't think we believe that. Sometimes there's a perception of what Alcoholics Anonymous thinks based on what a member says.
Yeah.
So I can't change them, but what I can tell all those that listen is that's not what AA thinks. We don't have the answer for every single person, but it was a solution for me. And in that book, it talks about this allergy, this sensitivity to booze, and this change that happens. And the only symptom described that is more. A normal person drinks and they feel like they're losing control, and they're like, man, I don't like this loss of control feeling. I'm going to stop at 3 or 4. And when I drink, I feel like I'm gaining control. Alcohol by class is like a narcotic. It's supposed to sedate, but it gives me energy, and it makes me say like, yeah, man, let's start our own landscaping company, dude. And I'm just like off, So that's part of the process of going through that book with somebody. I was like, whoa, that happens to me, man. That's
I was an AA guy for the beginning part of my recovery. And then after my dad passed last year, I had a relapse. And so since then, I've been doing NA. Just because I only get a certain amount of lunch breaks. So I attend a Zoom meeting every day at noon. And I found an NA group out of Providence, actually. And I really like that group. So I've been going to that. I still have an AA sponsor, and we live in the same apartment complex. I smoke cigarettes with them all the time. So, you know what I mean? So I still appreciate AA. And in NA, I'm also in GA. On the weekends. And I always say that my drug of choice was more. that was my drug of choice. It was whatever in that time is filling my void, whether it was alcohol, whether it was coke, whether it was opiates, whether it was benzos, whether it's weed, whether it's sex, whether it's gambling. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm addicted to the word more. And it's something that I'll always say because it's always more food. There's always going to be something that I need to work on and to be better. I'm never going to be cured of this. There's, recovering and recovered. And I'm always going to be in recovery, not recovered, because there's always more I need to work on with myself. How old were you when you first discovered drugs?
So when I was always curious about changing the way I felt. It's funny, man. As I said before, I don't really know. When I do an AA talk too, it's usually, not to be terminally unique or anything, but it's usually not a chronology, only because like my story is like you take a fistful of spaghetti, you huck it at a wall. There's my story. So I don't remember in detail. I know that I had a fascination with pharmaceuticals. I was like diagnosed with whatever, ADHD, ADD, ODD, and was prescribed Adderall, probably about 14. And I noticed one of the Adderalls, nothing, but took 2 or 3 of them puppies. And I'm like researching like how many like baby kangaroos fit into a mama kangaroo's pouch. Because I want to know. And that's where I developed some of my ego and my character defects too. The ego likes to be offended so it can tell itself it was in a fight. So my experience with drugs is getting on stimulants, mostly in capsules, discovering that, you can be creative and artistic with stimulants too by snorting them. And it would cause me to just look at information, watch movies, read books, and then use new information and put that up against somebody else and be like, hey, man, you're wrong. And I would start a division between myself and others. So that was my first experience with drugs. It really took off with the drinking as far as like a weekend warrior, party animal kind of guy. And I didn't get into like hard street drugs really as a daily habit until the alcohol stopped working. Some people, the alcohol stops working, they go into AA, they throw their hands up. I'm the kind of addict alcoholic. Like my drug of choice is your shit.
Yeah.
What's because like you said about the gambling and all that other stuff. There's a disease behind the disease, and I believe that you brought up the recovery versus recovered aspect, and that's an interesting topic to pick at and unload, I think.
Well, yeah, I know in the big book it says recovered something like 17 times. Like they use the word recovered a bunch of times in the big book. And I know it's always a hot button issue when somebody says, recovering or recovered. And in my opinion is whatever you want to say when you introduce yourself is your business and not mine. If you want to say you're a recovered alcoholic, then you're a recovered alcoholic. You're the one that can make that distinction. I'm not going to sit here and take your inventory. And the alcohol stopped working for me when I was 22. When I turned 22, I went so hard drinking at 21, and I went hard in high school every day. And I'm talking senior year, I drank every night. Going to college drunk, I didn't care. 22 came around and alcohol just wasn't working for me. And I knew that, and I had to get out. So I was trying mushrooms. I tried acid. I tried ecstasy. I tried cocaine. I was trying all these different things. And then I took 2 perk 10s and like a light bulb switched off. Like this is my shit that I'm going to use daily instead of drinking. And I turned the well off from drinking, and I broke through the well when it came to, perks and oxys, roxys, whatever I can put up my nose that day.
Yeah, that's very, I like how this is a conversation, man. This is cool, dude. I like this. This is awesome. So similar with me, alcohol stopped working, and it was still on the table. But I heard a speaker say this, and I one part of recovery to me is kind of having a stoic aspect, like because I'm fed stuff and I go, this is good, but it's good to meditate on the truth until it becomes the truth and then talk about it, which I do not do perfectly because I love information. I mean, I get loaded on information, so it's something I got to check. But for me, it's like, if you take if you take opiates, which I did, I got on the perk 30s because there was a point where it was alcohol, cocaine, and I couldn't have one without the other. Really, couldn't have
Yeah.
cocaine, alcohol, because I'm a
Yep.
basic guy, but I like to play around with getting shot through a cannon for a few minutes. But then I want to hide back in the basement where shit's safe, you know?
Yeah. Alcohol and coke go together so well. It was like,
Yeah.
if you're gonna, once you do cocaine and you drink, it's like, why haven't I been drinking with coke this entire time? Like, this is perfect. Um, and by the time my addiction was tailing off, by the time I was like in my early 30s, a decade later, I was mixing coke with my Roxy 30s in lines because I was trying to stop my heart. You know, I was done and I didn't think there was any way out. And I was speedballing is what I was doing. And I was eating, you know, Xanax like they were candy. I mean, I was doing everything to stop because I didn't have the balls to actually kill myself. And I heard this in a meeting once, and it really stuck with me 6 years later to this day is I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to be conscious anymore. And when I heard that, it's like a light bulb. I'm like, oh, that's how I felt at the end is I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to be conscious anymore. So you're saying you were into the Roxy 30s too?
Yeah, somewhat. I was, and it's funny because when I was strictly alcohol, I would watch people doing that when the Oxy 80s were around, and I would think like, you guys look like a lobster scratching yourself. You know, why do you want to do that? And just on a perfect night, perfect set of conditions, perfect opportunity. My spiritual chain was WD 40'd up with alcohol, and someone said like, dude, have you even tried like a perk 30? And I was like, no, you know, let me try it. And it was exactly where I was trying to get with a 30 pack, you know. And alcohol at that point stopped working a few nights before that or a few weeks or something like that. I don't remember specifically. I remember getting so drunk I drank myself sober.
Sober. Yep.
And I was like this. And I remember too, like I had to shotgun a tall boy on the way to the party just to get out of the car. And it stopped doing that for me. It started to work against me. The fear that alcohol used to combat and cover up started to increase with the ingestion of alcohol. So it's like, what the hell's going on, man? And then the opiates, you know, you take them enough over and over. This made it confusing to take the first step in AA because I'm like, I don't know if I'm alcoholic. And someone presented the information like they actually worked in the field a little and they were a member of AA and they said, well, certain opiates and shit are powerful enough to block the obsession to physically drink alcohol. My last night out there, I was sick for dope. I was living on the street on Mass Ave in Boston, running around South Boston, and I was picking up cans that were left outside of storefronts, you know, with just a little bit of booze in them to drink them. And the other drug addicts I was hanging with weren't doing that. And I always remembered that when I was taking the first step of AA. Like alcohol was the vehicle that brought me to everything else. I think like where somebody goes just all depends on truth because a spiritual path should be founded in the truth. And it's, you know, it's true for me. I'm an alcoholic first. I would never had the courage to try hard drugs before alcohol, but I think it could be other way around. And then that makes you wonder about like the singleness of purpose too. And I see a lot of that online on that group that I believe I met you on where there's like AA doesn't want to kick out people that have problems other than alcohol. I think where we come from is like our primary purpose is stay sober, help alcoholics get
Yeah.
so we're just aware that there's people that are better at those specific issues. But because I have both issues, I get to choose like, hey, you know, where do I want to get my solution? And by taking the steps with alcohol as the primary focus, it arrested the rest of the problem so I could find out the truth for myself. And then the obsession to use drugs was also removed by the removal of the obsession to drink alcohol, you know, therefore alcoholics. So anybody it says it in the 12 and 12 too, 12 steps and
Yep.
traditions. Anyone with a history of alcoholism, you know, it's good to find out, am I alcohol? There was a circuit speaker that used to say, try to catch alcoholism, you know, because it's a wonderful program. But I think NA is awesome too. DAA, CMA, they're all awesome. And
Yeah.
it's individual, like, hey, what was my primary function, you know, to treat this disease under the disease? Was it alcohol? Was it something else? You know, chicken or egg, and it comes down to individual truth, you know. And mine was that, like, I was an alcoholic first, all this other stuff, you know, I was on a train of alcohol, and it dropped me off in Funky Town with H and Coke and everything else. So,
and everything, you know, and everything derives from AA because, you know, NA, it's basic text instead of the big book, but the steps are almost identical except for you change one word. In my opinion, the most important wording in the 12 steps is it made my life unmanageable, because whatever is making your life unmanageable in that time is something you need to work on, whether it's a relationship, whether it's, you know, alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's gambling. And, you know, I learned that by going to GA meetings on the weekends. I found a group based out of Las Vegas because I figured if anyone can stop gambling, it's people in Las Vegas. So, you know, I do my GA meetings based out of Vegas. And, you know, it's been over 100 days without a bet now. So, and I was betting every single day because that shit's legal in Pennsylvania, sports betting. So I found myself betting on baseball every single day. Baseball's on 7 days a week. It's not like football that's on 3 days a week or whatever, 4 days a week. It's every day. So I found myself putting money down on FanDuel every day. And then my wife's finally like, how much are you spending? And I was like, too much. That was the correct answer. And we tried to like bring me down to $10 a week, but that was bullshit, you know. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm done. I'm just done. And I haven't placed a bet since July 13th. And that's my abstinent date. But, you know, everybody's got different. I have 4 different dates that are important to me. And it's April 25th, 2018. And that's when I learned about recovery. That's when I got clean from opiates. Then I got Leap Day, February 29th of 2020. It's the last time I took a drink, or I've been sober since then. Last time I had a drink was 2/28/20. And then I got April 1st, which is benzos and weed that I'm clean from. And now July 13th. So I celebrate 4 different days because all those days brought me to today and why I'm clean and sober in today's moment, why we can have this conversation with a clear mind. So we were around the same age then when alcohol stopped working for us and we graduated into opiates then, I guess.
yeah, isn't that a pretty cool parallel, dude?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was living in Massachusetts, having them sent up to me, like mailed from Jersey. So I'm from right outside of Philly in South Jersey. And I was living in Plymouth at the time. And my buddy would mail me, you know, food from Jersey that would look like, oh, this person just sent a, you know, a nice package. And he would slip a baggie of 30s in there for me. And my roommate, who was unsuspecting, is like, oh, you got more food for us? I'm like, yep. And really, I didn't give a shit about the food. I cared about what was packaged in with the foods. Take that little baggie out and go get high. So, you know, I was doing that in North Carolina when I lived down in North Carolina for a year. I was getting them overnighted to me from Jersey. And just all I cared about were those 30s, man. And once I discovered them, it was a wrap for a decade. But you graduated into heroin?
Yeah, I eventually became an IV heroin user, drinking too. And yeah, and it's like one of those things. I heard someone say at a meeting, like, people that don't have alcoholism adjust their actions to meet their dreams, and alcoholics in alcoholism and active addiction, we adjust our dreams to meet what our actions are. It was just like that for me. Like, needles freaked me out, man. I remember watching that movie Saw. I think it's either 2 or 3 where they throw the chick into the whole like swimming pool of needles. And I'm like, man, who would use a needle, man? Right. But when I discovered that relief could come quick and fast, then, you know, I had somebody else do it. And, you know, then I learned how to do it, and it was on from there. I was ripping and running with the needle thing. And I had a love affair with the whole Metal River, for a while. And then at the end, it was more of a prescription drug. I was trapped on these prescription drugs that would, I just found from this is just for me. You know, like I can't tickle the beast with a feather through the cage and wonder why it's biting my hand through the bars. You know, like um, I had to be completely abstinent. I had to get off everything, and it was something I didn't want to do, man, because I thought I had something different that the 12 steps aren't going to help me with. Like I have something, you know, and then I discovered that's the alcoholic mind, right? This constant divider. Like I'm a little bit different. Like you don't understand, you know, and that's what we want. I got to have a special for, oh, my fourth step is going to be a special one, special resentments. I'm going to, oh, my amends is going to be so, you know, a special amends. And it's like, that is the disease behind the disease, is that I'm painfully aware that I'm unique. And I'm listening to this mind. My mind's always manufacturing things about me and the world and information that isn't accurate. And for me, you know, the drugs and the alcohol, it's switching seats on the Titanic, really. But it boils down to presence, dude. You know, I noticed that today in recovery with the 12 steps and a God that I understand in my life that's personal to me. It's like I can be present. Like this is enough. It's not going to be better when the podcast ends. It isn't going to be better when I drive over to watch my nieces for the weekend and I'm alone and don't have, you know, my not at my house, you know, with the bride and our stepdaughter. Like that's not going to be better. Like, because this is disease of enough. It's never enough. Something needs to adjust it. I can't be here now. And if I was going to say too, like, because people ask me that I know, like, what do the 12 steps do? And I'm not scared to say, dude, they produce an effect, man. Like, and I often wonder that too. Like, can someone, because you meet people in recovery, right? Like, can someone just read about spiritual truth and access that? And my answer is maybe you could, but it's just like if you go into a house, if you ever seen the show Hoarders, and there's just crap everywhere, right? You don't know whether to start with the white balls, to start wiping dust off, or to just, you don't even know what to grab because there's so much of it. So the steps cleaned out enough stuff so I could go, okay, there's a fear lying over there. There's a resentment right there. And that helps me be present in the damn and also not conjure up a bunch of guilt and remorse and more fear because I have a fear or a defect presented itself. And so it's about being here now. And that's what drugs and alcohol did for me, is they got me out of now. You know, they gave me freedom of myself because I could do what I wanted, and the steps help it. So I have freedom from myself.
Yeah.
Reality, you know, we're here in
Yep.
reality. It can't be any different. No one else that I know can be any different than they are because they're driven like I am by whatever I'm driven by, the total summary of my life experience. And that's a good feeling, dude, because I remember doing a 12-step call. This kid, I grew up with the kid, and he asked me, "Can you tell me about AA?" He's drinking every day. So I come over, and I think he wants to not offend me because he doesn't know, you know, we're the same thing. And he puts the beers away, and he's smoking pot. And he goes, you know, and he knows me, you know, he goes, you know, I wouldn't say anything if you know, took a hit or whatever. I got some really good shit. And I remember not knowing what to say. And I just paused for a minute. I took a breath and I said, "Thanks, man. There's nothing in me to adjust. There's nothing in me to adjust. There isn't anywhere to go. There's nothing to try. There's nobody to be." The spiritual path to me is becoming nobody, because nobody's perfect. Anytime I get in trouble, it's because I'm a somebody, you're a somebody, and there's me, and then there's other, and there's this difference. There's a separator. So it's all about the unity too for me. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, you have to be spiritually sound in order to be like, no, that's because that happened to me. I live in the mountains in Pennsylvania now, but I'm like 3 hours from home in Jersey. My whole family's still in Jersey. So like I saw my sister's baby. It was her 1-year-old party, and I went there, and you know, they got a keg and shit, and it didn't bother me. And then, you know, one of her friends, this guy I used to smoke with all the time, and he pulled out a vape. He was like, "Here, he's so used to just handing me a vape and me just rip a vape. And he was like, "Here, do you want to take a hit?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm good, dude. I quit 3 months ago." He's like, "Oh shit, I didn't know that. My bad." And then there was like one of my good friends the other day was texting me like, "Hey, I'm packing a bowl for us." I'm like, "Dude, I don't smoke anymore." And he was like, "Well, no, it's no big deal if you smoke weed. Like, it's fine." I'm like, "If it's so fine, then how come you can't go 6 months without it?" And he was kind of like taken back, like, "Well, you know, I could, I just choose not to." I'm like, "Okay, whatever you want to say, but I'm good with that." I don't smoke anymore because that's not fulfilling me. And I had to be like, it's just not for me anymore. I smoke all day long. I developed costochondritis, which is when your ribs rub against your stomach from coughing so bad. And so now whenever I cough, I get this pain in my ribs that just won't go away, even though it's been 6 months. And I'm done with weed. I'm at that point. I'm 38 now. Like, I've quit everything else. So why not quit that too? And, I'm in a smoke free apartment, and my wife and I both don't smoke weed anymore. And it's just how we choose to live our life. And it was without it. When I got clean from the benzos is when I decided to quit weed too, because I found myself smoking all day, every day. And I didn't want to have that, like, that crutch. I wanted to try to do it without weed. And I wanted to do it through, because the AA steps are great and I've been through them, but I wanted to try the NA steps, which are like, I don't know if you're familiar with the NA steps, but they got a whole big workbook, almost like a homework workbook that you got to fill out. And like, I've gone through the AA steps like 4 different times, but this step is like, holy shit, is it? You got to work for it. So, I figured I'll try something different this time around after my relapse last summer. So how are you supporting your habit with being an IV user?
Well, Target, and I did not have a rewards card. Which is one of my amends. It's funny that you mentioned the weed thing. Just really quick, I was at a meeting and there was a new guy that he keeps coming back, and going out and coming back, and he was pontificating the meeting, and he goes, hey, he says, I'm not sober if I smoke weed, and I don't understand because alcohol is physically addicting and weed's only psychologically addictive, man. It's not a problem. And the old timer goes, so when the fuck are you getting a brain transplant? And I hear old timers say that the drink bone is connected to the drug bone. But yeah, man, support my habit. If you left your car unlocked, that was helpful, man. Especially if you had change in there. But in Boston on Mass Ave, which is the Skid Row in Boston, if anybody's familiar of it,
I'm familiar.
What's that?
I'm familiar.
Okay, yeah. So I don't have, I like to tell the story in detox. Like, yeah, man, I was out there, but I'm a sissy, man, and I couldn't make it out there for more than, I think, a week's the longest I went. I would crawl back into free detox. They get you a cab here and there, but mostly I would just boost, or I would do this repetitive revolving door of going to a halfway house. Some of them help you save your own money, or like getting that get well job. And I couldn't see this at the time, but it was always in my mind. Like, okay, I have $700 on my Chime account or whatever account I had. That's like probably 4 days. It's winter or it's summer, so there'll be plenty of beds in detox. I'll just go out for a few days, and they cover that in the book, a book. That mental blank spot, where I have this idea that comes up, and I start to respond to it, and all my reasoning tells me like that's going to end bad. But I tell I'm a stove toucher, man. I tell myself, like, here's how I can touch the stove. So supporting my habit was variable depending on circumstance, dude. Sometimes if I had a little good thing going for a little while, going to meetings, I might have like a couple $100 saved. But I was a booster when I tried to stay out of there. I would just go into Target, take some shit I thought maybe you wouldn't go to jail for taking, but just enough to maybe get whatever I needed to get. And that's how I support it. Yeah.
I remember one time I worked at Best Buy for like a decade, and I had stolen from them so many different ways. I used to be a manager, and I would go to the cash registers that I wasn't signing into, and I would get double-sided tape, and I would put the tape into underneath the little slot where you put the big bills underneath the cash register. And I would put the tape in there and literally fish $100 bills out. And that's how I could make $200-$300, $400 in a shift just by pulling out hundreds. And the other thing I did was, there was one time my dealer bought a new house, probably on my money. But he bought a new house and he needed new TVs, he needed surround sound, he needed new laptop, he needed all this shit. And he came in and I rung him up. I pressed cash, like he paid me cash. I gave him a receipt and then I voided the transaction like it never happened. So in our numbers, it's not like we were losing $1,900, but he got to walk through the, loss prevention at the front desk, show a receipt for all this shit he got, and be on his way outside. And he gave me like 100 pills as a thank you for the $3,000 worth of shit that he walked out with, I should say. So I know by any means necessary, I was going to get high, whether I was taking cash or whether I was taking product. I was going to find a will and a way. There was one time I almost did heroin at Best Buy. That same guy, he was, he's a dad first before a drug dealer. And I was trying to get him to come to my store so I could get high. He's like, dude, I have money this time. You don't got to front me. Because usually I need a front. And he was like, well, I'm kind of stuck right now. I can't get to you. And this other guy I worked with was a heroin user. And he could see that I was going through it, sweating, middle of the winter, and I'm sweating and shit like that. And he was like, dude, I have dope on me. Like, I can go set up a line for you and you can feel right again. And he kept saying it to me. And finally I was like, all right, yeah, let's do that then. And then like 30 seconds later, I get a text message from my guy saying, hey, I'll be there in 20. And I was like, never mind. Like, and that would have been, I know once I snorted heroin, there was going to be no going back to pills. And I knew that about myself. I knew I was a drug addict, but I didn't want to cross that line because I knew that there was no coming back. I thought, well, if I can responsibly have jobs and make money and have my own place and stay on pills every day, then it's just part of my life and it's no big deal. But once I do heroin, then I have a real problem. And I rode that line to the very end of like being a white collar criminal in order to support my habit every single day.
Do you think that too? That makes me wonder. I believe there is some truth to like the ROA. Route of administration does increase the at least the speed that someone's hitting bottom. And it's interesting too. I know my girlfriend's in the program and her bottom was way different than like guys like you and I, man, way different. But I think that depends on individual perception. I'm a kind of guy, I got to get squeezed through a tube of toothpaste slow for me, give up the
but I think we all have different lows. But I think everyone has the same bottom. Your low might be homeless and mass. My low might be like running out of money and stealing from my company. Your girlfriend's low might be this, that, or the third. But our bottom is the day we surrender to the program and say, I need help. And that's when you can finally start climbing out again. Because we all could have different lows, homeless, lose job, lose family. But I think the bottom is when you finally hit and you start to surrender and start working your way back up again and out of that hole that you dug yourself into.
Yeah, dude, I try. And I'm glad you brought that up too. Cause I try, when I'm at the podium or sharing in a discussion meeting, I try to keep a lot of the details out unless I look around and I'm inspired. Like, okay, this looks like maybe they could benefit from more specifics if they need to identify with me in that way. But, and I try to keep my shares to alcohol and AA as best as I can, and in other 12-step fellowships the same way. I go to DAA, yeah, it's a matter of perception. I don't think one qualifies the other over the other. I would like, if I could take the heavy language out of it, I was an idiot. So I would just go, like I didn't really have it like a fiber of like maturity or responsibility. So to me, like not having money saved, not having a place to live, like there's still a party going on in my head, dude. Like, well, my question was not like, well, what if it's like, can we party like tonight? How I remember I used to ask people that too. If we were like in a detox and someone goes, yo, you want to check out? I got this going on. I'd be like, how long will it last? That's what I was. How long do you think we'll be out there for like a night or two before we have to go back in? And it was just like that for me. And yeah, everybody's the bottom is an internal place. that's based on our perception of what the bottom is, right? It depends on everybody's threshold and tolerance for personal pain. It's different, but the one symptom that we all have in common, man, is we can't stop when we start up, and when we honestly want to stop, we were not able to stop.
Yeah, there's an old timer that I used to see all the time at meetings, and he said, "I don't know how to stop anything, but I know how to stop starting." And what that means is, he never quit cigarettes, but he stopped starting to buy packs. He never learned how to quit drugs, but he stopped starting to buy drugs. He never learned how to quit alcohol, but he stopped starting to buy alcohol. So all he knew how to do was to stop starting, but he didn't know how to quit anything.
Yeah, dude. I think the hardest part, the program was simple for me. I was brought through like an old school big book method from this guy from the Midwest. I was taking through the 12 steps over a phone. So I felt at the time there wasn't really anyone that I trusted to sponsor me, although I had joined a local group. I'm like 6 or 7 months sober, so I'm experiencing the dry symptoms of untreated alcoholism, which is a frustrated mind. I'm saying I like him, but I don't like him, and I don't even know why I'm listening to this mind. And so we went through the steps simply, and like yourself, I've done it a few different ways. I've done right now I'm in the process of like what we call big book step study up here, which is essentially the same thing. I've done back to basics. I've done this exercise that was made pretty popular in the 90s by this circuit speaker, Mark Houston and Don Pritz. You do like this exercise with We Agnostics. I've done it, and it's all the same result. I forgot where I was going with that, but yeah, it is a simple thing, but the hard thing was running out of myself, was realizing that on my power with my ideas, I had lost trust in my own ability to think, which for me is how I describe part of step 1 and step 2. Like I'm not able to do this without help. I'm not able to do this on my own ideas as they stand, even if they look very good. Like I can't trust that in the beginning, until I turn my life over to an outside source of power that isn't emotionally attached to my image of myself. It makes me think of ego too, like my ego, my stage character. This is what I am. If someone were to do this to me, I'll do that because I ain't taking that. That's how I operated. I had this story line about myself, this trauma that I was attached to. I identified with that. So I couldn't be in the experience with life now. It was always in my head. I was never into my life. So like that was hard. That was a learning process, even as I became a sponsor, dude, like to let go, because then it starts to leak into recovery. This style of recovery is the right way. And I'm an AA history nut. Yeah, I use there's an old timer that said you can learn so much of the big book that you can walk up to a mountain and blow your head off with it. Because I got inundated with all this stuff. I was like a speaker tape crackhead, man. Like if it wasn't on a speaker tape, it didn't happen. And that was good for me to do because I had to go through these experiences to find out like defects. What are my defects? Because all I had were the basics: stealing, lying, cheating, self-condemnation, self-pity, loose talk, and gossip. But it does get deeper. They say it's like peeling back layers of the onion or whatever. And so I was fascinated with AA history because of my relationship with the guy that carried the message to me. He was from the Midwest, pretty close to where AA started. We had taken the steps very quickly in a way that wasn't familiar with in New England, really. And he told me to go sponsor people. And I'm like, I wasn't used to that. And I did it. And he would tell me things like, you don't get it and then go give it away. You don't get it until you give it away. He's like, you have 11 steps. You need to give them to other people if you want to keep this thing. But by taking the 12 steps, let's not sell ourselves short and claim that I'm going to immediately have this like profound cosmic emotional intelligence, because I didn't and still probably don't. But they did clear away enough of the negative thinking and the fear-based thinking and enough of the past so I could get right with other people, start paying my debts, start to focus on the present, start to pray to God, asking him in the morning, hey, can you direct my thinking? Hey, I'm here. And I started calling God like, hey, dude, like like I'm talking to you and having this personal relationship, and things started to happen. But anyway, I knew I was doing something with information still. I'm still using this. I would go to meetings and like listen to everybody. And I wasn't really listening. I was just like, that's wrong. It doesn't say that in the book. Yeah, that's not, they don't have a mental obsession, probably a hard drinker. And I would share, and I wouldn't directly slander anybody, but I would very vaguely and indirectly try to puff up my knowledge of the big book, and to look down on others, and to separate myself and to try to be right. And I realized over time, like, I feel shit about myself still in some way. I have this program; it's removed the obsession from me. But what's up? What else is out there? And I remember hearing this tape from a history workshop about the story of the Oxford group, where AA came from. And I started to buy these old books. I would listen to the guy say a book. I'd go on thriftbooks.org, buy the book, and research it myself. And as I went through AA history, it started to shatter my belief systems. Like, I thought the first 100 AA members did the steps as in the big book. That is actually not true. Bill Wilson co-authored a big book and passed it around, but they didn't know really what they were doing. They were kind of practicing some of the suggested stuff from the Oxford group, which was just like, if you surrendered to something, you were deflated, you'd have dependence upon God, you'd do some sort of moral inventory or confession. You'd go make restitution for harms done. You'd continue to do this by continuing that process and helping others. And we broke it down and wrote a book about it, but we really wrote it to sell a book. So that doesn't take any value away from the big book, but I've seen it myself and experienced it myself firsthand, like orthodoxy, dogmatism. It goes against what a spiritual program's about. You know, if you hold the big book too tight, it never opens. And so, like, how can I make a book orthodox when at the very end of it, it's like, hey, we realize we know only a little. You know, these guys didn't know everything. So I started to go through AA history and follow it up. And I realized it's a story. It's the story of AA. Just like you and I are telling each other stories, AA has a story. And I watched that was the first material we wrote. But as we went along, we wrote the traditions. Bill starts writing to the grapevine in Language of the Heart. Awesome book. You should check it out for whoever's listening. And we started to open up, and the doors started to get wider. And we realized, we don't have to close our doors to just low bottom drunks. We can help people that might potentially be alcoholic. It says that in the traditions. So I started to follow that story along and realized that as these founders of AA, the pioneer AA members, most of them, as they got older and died, started to really not know. They started to say, hey, we don't know. Everyone has the right to. And it started.
Even Bill struggled because he was having a breakdown when he wrote at 12 and 12, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was in a depression for I think quite a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just like you were saying, they don't know everything. And, they were kind of just going off each other's, like, whatever, like, okay, I know that too. And relating to each other and just getting through it through fellowshipping and getting through it together.
Absolutely. And we should never, I like to speak for AA in the sense of, if I want to represent AA to someone, I don't want to say to somebody like, if somebody says to me like, hey, I'm going to try therapy, I'm not going to go, well, if you don't want the, well, the disease will lie to you. Because I don't know if you might need therapy, dude. AA never takes the attitude as a whole worldwide fellowship that we have all the answers, because we don't, and we don't want to, I don't want to represent AA as like, hey, I know the way, this is the only way. Because think about how many people come in with kind of like a side eye at religion. Why is that? Well, because religion says this is it. This is the only truth. We have a way. It worked for me. It's worked for other people I know. It's nice to meet you. Let's grab a cup of coffee, dude. That's the attitude. AA never says. I look up online sometimes, like, Reddit. Why I stopped going to AA, and I read what people say so I can try to not be that way, because I don't want to give someone the impression that we're a bunch of arrogant know-it-alls that have the only way. Now it's tough, because with me, I have to remember it does work for me. But I don't want to take that and try to, beat someone with a club of self-righteousness that, like, we're the only game in town. It's only the only game in town for me. I like talking about, like with you, like other recovery, other higher powers. I got my own higher power.
Yeah, there was an old timer that gave me shit in the post I made the other day in the Friends with Bill, level of press, radio, and film. And I was like, that's up to you. And he said, well, I just don't want you to ever have to represent AA and then God forbid you relapse. And I was like, I did relapse, but I have full transparency that I relapsed because I stopped going to meetings, I stopped talking to my sponsor, I stopped working the steps, I stopped having a connection with my higher power, and I relapsed. And I'd rather somebody else know that it's okay to relapse and get back on the horse again, and as opposed to just sweep my relapse under the rug and pretend like it didn't happen for everybody else's appeasement. And he was like, okay, that's a good point. And, just checking or something like that. Because unfortunately, a lot of old timers look down upon doing this and doing the podcasting and all that. But it's like there's also a podcast about the grapevine. They're the one, and I'm not making any money on doing my podcast. I pay $9 a week to run StreamYard. So if anything, I'm paying $9 a week to do my podcast because I don't have any ads. I don't have any sponsors. I do this because it's my sober hobby, is to help other people hear these stories and to have some kind of connection. I want to connect with one person each episode. That's my goal, is one person to at least watch us and get something from it. And, and we don't have to end with this, but I'll end with this, is that early on, I've been doing this 3 years, 200 plus episodes now. And I was really struggling I was obsessed with the numbers and like seeing how many viewers I got each episode or listeners I got. And then one night, I got a message on Instagram from this girl from the UK. And she said, I just watched 8 of your episodes and I'm going to go to AA tomorrow and try sobriety out for the first time. And that kept me going for another year. You know what I mean? Like that completely subsided all the worry about numbers, because I had one person tell me that it connected with them and they're going to get sober now because of it. And that's what kind of drives me to continue to do this podcast and look for guests like yourself to tell some story about what it was like, what happened, and what's it like now.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for sharing that, too. The anonymity thing, man. The 12 traditions, if I've learned anything about them, I got up to like tradition 4 with a service sponsor. They're a person that helps you see different ways you can conduct yourself and change your perception of yourself at AA meetings by being tolerant of others, by using the 12 traditions, basically. And we're in the middle of that. And he taught me some pretty vital things. Like one is like everyone has the right to be wrong. Again, AA history. Dr. Bob, the co-founder of AA, would when they would make new meetings, they would sometimes print stuff out. I don't think Dr. Bob did this, but they would put like advertisements on a grocery store, like shopping carts and stuff like that. Because anonymity doesn't mean I'm going to be really secretive and private in case I relapse. Now everyone has the right to be wrong, so it could mean that for somebody. But for me, what my takeaway from the traditions, steps in my life, all that stuff is like, I don't want to try to make a name for myself in an anonymous organization. God is anonymous. If a hurricane happens or a beautiful sunset, God or higher power, universe, whatever you conceive of that, to whoever's listening, he doesn't, or she doesn't come out and go, hey, see what I just did there? It was pretty cool. They just do it and they're out, and so just like that, anonymity is not necessarily protecting my name. It just is the level of press, radio, and film, because I don't want to try to get something that I can pump into the gas line of my own ego. I just want to do what you're talking about, just because I want to be useful, helpful to somebody else, and I don't want to take any credit or get any payment for it. That's anonymity to me in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Look at AA. AA doesn't go around going, we knew the doctor that came up with the allergy. We don't say that. We just said, hey, we met this doctor. He said this. It kind of matches our experience. What do you think? You know what I mean? We never take, because without AA, there wouldn't even be a treatment industry, but we don't run around taking credit for that, because we know that religion has helped us, that psychiatry has helped us, that a bunch of people, it's a collective effort. So anonymity to me can also mean like, I don't take individual credit. I recognize I'm one moving organ in a whole entire body, and I need the rest of that body to operate and do my job as the organ, you know, in recovery. Yeah.
Perfectly put, Seth. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me today and, you know, bullshit with me and, you know, talk to me about the book, talk to me about your story. And I think there's always a way to relate to somebody. Whether I always ask questions like, you know, were you the oldest? Were you the youngest? How many siblings, parents stay together? Because I want to give more chances for an audience to feel like they can relate to somebody. Like you saying you're the oldest, me go, oh, I'm the oldest too. And all of a sudden, everything you're saying, I'm relating to because I related with you so early on in your story about how old you were, and you know maybe the age. And I try to figure all that kind of stuff out early on to keep people listening because they're relating and they want to hear more because they've already discovered. Well, we are both the oldest. I wonder what else he has to say about this. And, you know, I find those questions early on in the episode important because it finds staples, a way to people to relate to the speaker.
Yeah, JD, man, I can't even tell you, man. Not a BS party line either, man. I'm so grateful that you have on the show today, dude. And I think keep doing what you're doing, man. It's wonderful that you're helping others, a lot of different types of others to establish identification, to start a path in recovery, man. Because hey, these kind of podcasts, dude, helped me. I had this job at a factory for like my first year and a half sober, man, and I just listened to like podcast like I was at a meeting all day. And so like, isn't it interesting that people talk about manifesting thoughts or things? It's like I always did in about it's kind of a little ego, but it's like, man, that'd be cool if I could get on one of those. And here we are. So thank you so much for helping fulfill that part of service, and for you being such a great service and help to all of us in our recovery.
Yep, be on the lookout. Thanksgiving to New Year's Eve, new episodes every single day to celebrate. Well, I'm not really celebrating. I'm trying to shine a light on relapse during the holidays. Mm-hmm. So by making awareness around relapse during the holidays, I'm releasing a new episode every single day from Thanksgiving to New Year's Eve. So I'm going to be recording a lot of these in order to have enough episodes to do it that way. I did it back in September. For Recovery Month in September, I release a new episode every single day. I released 34 in 30 days. And I have a full-time job. I take care of my wife. She has MS. We have a 10-year-old. So I have other shit that I do, but I love doing these podcasts because I get so much out of them myself. And I love meeting new people and hearing their experience, strength, and hope. And these are my meetings. I do NA, I do GA, I do AA. But these are, what they say is a meeting is two alcoholics having a conversation. So it's like I'm doing 5 meetings a day sometimes because I'll record a bunch of these in one day and I can go to sleep spiritually sound knowing that I had 5 good conversations that day.
Absolutely. And hey, the holidays made me think to say, life's a gift, man. Open it.
Yep.
Open it, man.
I appreciate that, Seth. I'll talk to you soon, bud.
Thanks, man. Very blessed.
Have a good day.
Yeah, you too, man. Thank you, JD.